Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Context Titles, Administrators, and Coordinators. I'm Samantha. I'm the Director of Customer Education, and I am joined by my favorite teammate, Devin, who's going to be helping us out today in the chat. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and dive into today's topic. We're calling this topic sort of a ClubExpress basic. So this is going to be something that we like to revisit, we like to go back to, not just for new clubs who may have just signed up, but also to act as a refresher so that you're constantly thinking about website contacts and website access. So in today's session, we're going to talk about a lot of items that might go together, but might be completely separate. So when we talk about titles and contacts, you're generally thinking of things like a president, a treasurer, or a membership director. Now, those may be people that exist in your club or your association, and they may also be administrators and coordinators, but not always. You may have a lot of different members in your organization helping out. So we're going to help you think about the ways that you might want to organize those levels of access, explain what they're each used for, and talk about how you can add those to your site and manage them moving forward. So the first thing that we want to talk about is what is a title or a contact? Titles are always going to be defined by your organization. When you add in different titles, you may see that ClubExpress provides a standard set of 5 different titles like president, treasurer, data protection officer, membership director, but you may have additional titles or even titles that are slightly different but have a similar meaning. So president versus Commodore. And your titles are paired with a contact. When you create that title, you then assign a contact, in your database to associate with that title. So these are people in your organization who are members who fill those roles and who fill that title. These are also things that are used when you are setting up officer notifications for your treasurer or for your membership director. So if those notifications have been giving you trouble, or if you haven't set those notifications up yet, we'll go through how to do that today. And then the next thing that we want to talk about is our levels of security. So when you're thinking about those organization contacts, they may also be administrators or coordinators, but they may not be. Your president may not have full access to the back end of the site. They may really be there to kind of manage things or head up meetings. They may not be involved, like, say, a webmaster or a web administrator. So let's talk about the different levels of access, what you get with them, and you can kind of think about where you might want to put different people in your organization. So right off the top, we have an administrator. That is your site-wide administrator who has access to all features and databases. Now, if you are an organization that has chapters or subgroups, we're talking about an administrator that would be an administrator of the parent organization to be able to see all of that information. But if you're an organization that does not have subgroups, this is just an administrator of your full site. When you sign in, you see the full control panel, the full dashboard, you have access to everything. We usually recommend that you keep your administrator access to around 8 or 10 people. You really don't want to have a ton of people accessing the full back end of your site. There are a lot of reasons for that. Most of them just have to do with the number of people that can make changes. ClubExpress doesn't have a giant undo button, and so there isn't always a way to revert changes that someone may have made. So an administrator is someone that you really want to make sure fully understands the capabilities of ClubExpress. You want to encourage them to read about our features in our knowledge base, watch our tutorials. You really want to make sure that that person can be trusted with having that access. They also have access then to a lot of your databases or all of your databases. That includes financial transactions and data, that includes membership data and information. So again, thinking about the full access and what that means and who really needs to have that in your organization. Now, your module coordinators, that's going to be your most popular choice for your volunteers. So, anyone in your organization who is just helping you out with a couple of things here and there. Module coordinators can also be a great choice for those organization contacts who don't need full access to the back end. We're thinking treasurer or even membership director. They don't all need to have access to every single feature on your site. And so you might want to really carefully pick and choose the modules and reports and databases that those coordinators have access to. And we'll show you how you can do that and really take your time and think about the access that those folks are going to have. Subgroup administrators, those for those organizations that do have subgroups, that gives the admin site-wide access similar to an administrator, but for their subgroup only. They'll have access to modules and databases for their subgroup. They can see financial transactions for members of their subgroup. They can see membership information for members of their subgroup, but they do not have access to setup features. So that bottom panel of the control panel, and we'll take a look at that when we're visiting our control panel, is not something that a subgroup admin can manage. And below that, we have very specific access. And this is access that we talk about a lot in the webinars directed to those features. And we'll kind of touch on it just a little bit here. But our focus today is mainly to give access across your site to full modules. In some cases, in the cases that you see on your screen, like custom pages, photo albums, events, forums, and blogs, you can give a member access to individual items. So you can give them access to an individual custom page and allow them to manage that page, publish a new draft, etc. With event contacts and forum moderators, they have access to a single item only that's created by an admin. So a blog author has the ability to add blog posts to the blog that they're the author for. An event contact can manage the event that they're the contact or the coordinator for, and so on. And then the last couple of categories that you'll see on the right-hand side in that chart, your members and your site visitors. So we're very familiar with what the member login gives us, right? It gives us access to that member-only side. But as you know, your member login then determines what level of access you should have beyond that. So if you're a member plus an administrator, you get that full access when you sign in. So now that we've taken just a very brief tour of the levels of access, we kind of have a basis for what we're going to see and what we're going to look at. Now I want to switch gears here and take us to our demo site. And that's where we're going to be spending most of our time. So let me go ahead and share my screen. All right, and now everyone is seeing the demo club. This is our Northwest Balloon Club, and I'm going to go ahead and sign in as Martin Smith. Martin Smith is an administrator, so when Martin signs in, he can see the control panel right away. Now, coordinators and subgroup administrators will also see the control panel. When a subgroup admin signs in, they're of course only going to see items related to their subgroup. When a module coordinator signs in, they'll only see control panel tabs that have the things they need access to. And we're going to take a look at that a little bit later. But first, we can take just a quick tour and see that Martin has access to every tab, every item within the tab. And here's that setup section that because Martin Smith is a full site administrator, not just a subgroup admin, he sees. Now let's talk about the ways that we can add coordinators and the ways that we would manage our contacts and titles. So first things first, we want to take a look at contacts and titles and get those out of the way and talk about the ways that we can make sure members can contact the right people with our organization. I'm going to visit the Club tab, which is the tab right before Communications. Take a pause here. Your tab may not be labeled Club. That's okay. Your tab may be labeled something different, like Association or League. That's determined by your club options, and it does not change the features that you would have access to on this tab. So when we're in the Club tab, we're going to look down at the bottom and we see our titles option in Setup here. Now, in website modules is where you'll find the Contact Us module. So your Contact Us page is really a module that you would enable on your site. If you choose not to have that contact information on your site, it might be something that you haven't enabled yet. You'll need to go and enable that using the configure option. The first thing that you need to do is configure the title. And then, as we said, we're going to associate a contact with that title. We'll go ahead and select titles. And remember that we mentioned that there are already some titles that may have been created for us. And we'll see that when we add our title here. We have some titles that are already loaded. I can go ahead and edit that existing title. I can add a new title. Let's see what it looks like when I edit our president title. So at the top, we call it president internally. So we'll leave that as president and say that this person who holds the title serves as the president. Now, if we wanted to rename this Commodore and say that the person holding the title serves as president, that's okay too. The reason that you need to identify what type of title that is, even if it's not something that's named the same, is because these options correspond with system emails that are sent out on behalf of your organization for things like membership signup, event registration, etc. So all of this information is relevant to the tags that are pulling that information off your site. So when we need to load, let's say, president information or membership director contact info into a system email, the system's going to go look for that title and look for the contact that's been associated with that title. So one of the biggest things, either when you are signing up for ClubExpress for the first time or as a regular audit of your site, you absolutely should be double checking that you have all of those boxes covered so that your system emails are going out with the right information. In a lot of cases, if you don't have membership director information loaded or treasurer information loaded, so see here we have our finance director, we'll go ahead and edit that. And we've added our finance director, and that person holds the title as treasurer. So again, it does not matter if the title is different. When we add in that information, if we don't have it, a lot of times the system will put in the president's information. So in a lot of membership director emails, if you don't have someone who's associated with that title, the system doesn't know what information to necessarily populate. Double check your titles. Make sure that when you add your title, you enter the title and who is holding that. And excuse me, if that title applies to one of the 5 areas that we're focusing on here. Now let's talk about email addresses and other titles. You see here that we have a bunch of co-chairs. So those co-chairs don't necessarily have a title. We're using those for committee co-chairs. You can add additional titles that don't necessarily fit in any of these categories and still show them on the website if you have contacts associated with them. You might have a lot of committee directors that you want to have contact information listed on your contact page. You can continue to add those committee directors and add those titles. Now, remember that you're associating the member with the title separately. This is just where you're listing out those titles. You may see here that we have these email addresses associated with the title. That is not telling the system who is associated with it. What this is doing is saying that no matter who holds this title, this is the email address to be associated with the title. And we'll control that on the contact screen. So if you have standard email addresses that you use for all of your organization contacts, you're going to want to load those into the email address with the title. What that does is it allows the member who's, say, serving as your finance director to maintain their personal email address in their member profile, but still get contacted through this email address for professional or official club duties. Now, once we have our titles in place, that's when you pair them with your contact. And we'll go ahead and back in our website modules section, we'll find our Contact Us module. And we see that we have a handful of contacts already loaded. When you add a contact, you're first choosing the member using our member selector. And then we'll go ahead and choose a member here. You choose a title. You'll see that we have all of the titles preloaded for us. So I will go ahead and let's say that this is another co-chair. We can choose to show this person on our contact screen. You may opt not to. Now, if you are intending to associate these titles and contacts simply for system emails and notifications that you can set up, that's okay. You can just opt not to show this person on the contact screen. They'll be associated with different options and they won't have their contact information visible. And then you control how much information is visible and to who, and then which email is being used. Now, for our co-chairs, you recall that we did not have separate email addresses for those. So maybe that's the case where we want to just use the member's email address for contacting. But in the case of our treasurer, we'll go ahead and save. In the case of our treasurer or our finance director, you can see that the email that we're using is the title. So that's that standard email address that's associated with the title of finance director, not Beatrice's member profile email address. And when we visit our Contact Us page, we can see all of our club contacts, including our new contact who does not have any information shown, but is still being shown on the Contact Us page. Now let's talk about notifications that can be sent out to some of those contacts. There are two instances in which in which some of your club contacts can receive automatic notifications from the system. That's in the case of your membership director and your treasurer. Let's take a look at the treasurer's notifications first. We'll go into the money tab, and if you have access to that setup section, you'll also see the money options option. We'll go ahead and click that. Let's scroll down, and in our payment options section, we have right towards the middle here, notify the treasurer on payments. You can say yes, and now your treasurer is going to get an email every time someone makes a payment on your site. Depending on the number of people that are making payments on your site, making purchases, making donations, that may be a lot of emails for your treasurer. But if you have someone who really needs to keep on top of your accounting and keep on top of reporting, you may want to enable that. The second spot for notifications would be your membership director. In the People tab, in a similar spot under People Options, that's where you're going to control your membership director notifications. And if we scroll down to miscellaneous options, when do you want to notify your membership director? We have a handful of different options. So there are more options than notifying the treasurer, which is a yes or no option. If you want to get notified whenever someone signs up, or only if they've signed up and paid, if they've renewed, so on. Now, remember, these notifications can't go anywhere if the system doesn't know who to send them to. So you have to make sure that your contacts and your titles are in tip-top shape. So now that we've taken a look at contacts and titles, which is one way that you can organize your club contacts and your organization administrators, let's talk about the access that anyone might have on your site. We've already seen that Martin Smith has pretty broad access. Remember, Martin Smith is a full website administrator. So he has access to all of our databases, all of the modules. He can add and remove modules, make site-wide changes, etc. Now, if we want to add and manage our administrators and coordinators, there are a couple of places that we can do that. I'm going to go back into the Club tab, and in the Setup section, we'll click on Administrators and Coordinators. At the very top, you'll see all of your site-wide administrators. You always must have one administrator. If you're the sole administrator of your organization, you'll never be able to remove yourself until you add an additional administrator. Adding an additional administrator is really simple. It's just choosing a member from the member selector and adding them as an admin. Now, when they get added as an admin, they'll receive an informational email from ClubExpress introducing them to the website. It'll give them a quick tour of the control panel and kind of show them around so that if this is their first time exploring the back end of a ClubExpress website, they're not left to their own devices. So they do get a little bit of help to kind of familiarize them with the back end and give them a good introduction and a good baseline to get you started. Underneath that, we have our coordinators. Now, remember, coordinators are those who have access to individual features and modules. Now, we see a handful of coordinators here, and we have additional options rather than just deleting the coordinator. We can take a look at the functions that they have access to, and we can also copy their coordinator functions to another member. Let's talk first about adding and managing coordinator rights. We can select Add Coordinator, and our screen is going to look very different from adding an administrator. It takes us to a brand new screen where we then choose our member using that member selector, and then we choose all of the features, reports, and setup options that we want them to have access to. And great news is that this page probably looks slightly familiar and slightly comfortable because all of these are just mimicked from our control panel tabs. So it's really easy for you to kind of go through and say, okay, my treasurer is signing up and I need to just go to the money tab and kind of click everything. Maybe I just want to check all, but I don't want to give them the option to edit the tax rates or my bank accounts. All of that's good though. And then maybe you want to give them access to emailing because you want to give them the ability to email people about missed payments. Now let's go ahead and cancel out of this and let's take a look at some of the addition or some of the existing rights that we've added. When we click on functions, we can see all of the individual items that any member has had access to checked off. This isn't the only way that we can view all of the access that people have across our site. We'll take a look at a report that'll be super helpful for us in just a moment. Now, let's say that you have another member who's coming in to maybe take over Beatrice's duties, right? Or you have someone coming in who is going to help out Beatrice. And you take a look and you see that Beatrice has access to a bunch of things, and you don't want to maybe go through and add all of that back to another person. If I copy Beatrice's rights, I can choose another member and say I want that member to have the exact same access that Beatrice has. Couple things to note. If you're copying coordinator rights to someone who already has access to a couple of different things, it will copy and replace, meaning if Beatrice didn't have access to it, they won't have access to it. So kind of keep in mind if you want to replace someone's access with new access, like the person you're copying from, or if you want to just add additional access to that new person. Now, apart from adding a coordinator to maybe a lot of features, maybe there's just one module that you want to add them to quickly. You don't necessarily need to go in and select all of those checkboxes. We'll go back to our previous page, and I want to choose someone to help out with just one module, just one feature. In the control panel, whenever you're looking at a different tab, clicking the configure button changes slightly. It always has the same features and functions, but you're taking a look at the modules for that specific tab. So what that means is that whenever you are ready to add a coordinator to just a specific module, you find that module in your control panel and click that configure option. And we have our coordinators tab for any of our modules available. I'll go ahead and click that coordinator tab and I'll add my coordinator. Search for our member by last name. And now they're a coordinator for that specific module. And when Jenny Cho signs in, she'll have access to additional tabs if she has access to other features, and she'll now have access to this new module. Now, unlike adding an administrator, when you add a coordinator to a module, they'll also get notification, but they won't necessarily have access again to all of these features. So they'll know how to use the control panel, but remember, they won't have access to every single tab or every single feature. Now, what I want to do is quickly go back into our money tab. I want to click the configure button and then show again that we're changing the the modules that we see and the functions that we see are changing when we enter into a new tab. So if you're looking to quickly give someone access to discount coupons so that they can create those coupon codes on the fly, we can go ahead and add Jenny to that as well. Now, before we take a look at what Jenny's access might look like, I want to talk about the way that we can keep track of all of the things that we've just done. I went into the club tab and there were a bunch of people there who had access to things. And now I've added Jenny to a couple of different modules here. And I think last year I added a subgroup admin. It's a lot to keep track of. We highly recommend that you do a general audit of who has access to different features and functions on your site on a regular basis. When we say regular, we don't have a set time frame. But here are some tips to help you determine what regular means to you. How often are you adding administrators or coordinators, and when was the last time that you looked at it? If you're an organization that is maybe smaller, not really hosting a lot of events, not inviting a lot of people to do a lot of work on your site. Maybe you're a small team. You probably only need to take a look at that a couple of times a year. If you're a larger organization and you are constantly giving access to a lot of people, especially if you have more than 5 administrators, remember that any administrator can grant coordinator access to someone. So while you might be an admin and haven't added any other coordinators, that doesn't mean that someone else hasn't. So I'm in my website tab, and I'm going to take a look in my admin functions section and click reports. And we have a website traffic report that's going to help you determine how many people are visiting your website, but we're focusing today on website security. We'll go ahead and click that category, and we can view that website security either by function or by member. There's no wrong way, whichever way makes the most sense to you. Maybe you want to take a look at it by member because you can quickly determine if that person needs access to everything. I'll go ahead and select next, and I'm just going to open this report in a new tab in my browser. So now we can see our quick report that shows us every member in alphabetical order and everything that they've been given access to. We can even see if someone has very minute access, so access to just custom pages, or if they are a subgroup admin. So we can see here that Jenny Cho has been selected as the subgroup admin for a couple of different subgroups within this organization. We could scroll down and we can see where we have our full administrators. So not a lot of people on this site do have access, but it gives us a really great breakdown of where we can do some cleanup, even and especially with individual items like custom pages, photo albums. I really want to make sure that you review those as often as you think you need to, even setting a reminder to go in and check that report every so often. We'll go back into our main screen here. So we've talked about adding your contacts and titles and managing all of the different levels of security on your site and trying to find where it might be best to place someone. Some additional things to keep in mind. We talked about our communications and all of those system emails that are pulling that club contact information. When you go into your system emails, many of the system emails will have tags inserted into them. I'll go ahead and select one of my system emails just to take a quick look at it. We can see even in this one, here we go. Here's our membership director title, name, phone number, and email. All of these can be replaced. If you would prefer not to have a certain contact appearing in different emails, you can always swap those out with other contacts in your organization, data protection officer, treasurer, president, etc. But the key is that information needs to be populated. The title has to exist, and the system has to know who's been associated with it. And then the last question that we do get quite often with relation to the notifications that your club contact may get. So, your membership director or your treasurer. The system does not have the ability to send those notifications to more than one person. So, if you have a membership director and you have a director's assistant, you only have the ability to send those notifications to one email address. So, we recommend then if you need to share those with multiple people, that you set up any sort of forwarding or distribution list that you need to. The system will only send those notifications to one email address. So if you add multiple membership directors on your site, I believe it's usually the first person listed that gets those notifications, but it may not always be. We highly recommend that if you have multiple people sitting in titles, that you make that clear distinction on the site. You're only associating one person with one title. All right. Devin, how are we doing on questions today? We went through quite a bit and connected a lot of different pieces of admins, coordinators, contacts, and titles. How are folks handling it all?
Yeah, most of the questions we were able to answer in the Q&A. I'll go over a couple of them. One of the ones that we did get was how do you differentiate when you're setting up your contacts and titles and they have email addresses? How do you differentiate like what modules will use those emails versus things like setting up a coordinator for, say, an event or an ad hoc form? So as
Hmm.
it works right now, when you're setting up a coordinator for something like an event or a form or a survey, that is going to be using the email in that member's member profile. It is not going to use the title email. The only thing that's going to use a title email is going to be all the tools that specifically call out someone holding a title. If it's referring to them as a module coordinator or event coordinator or form coordinator, those are all going to be defaulting to the member's profile email. We just got a question about someone asking how to remove permissions. You would remove permissions by essentially doing the same thing in reverse that we did to give them. So you would just go to the control panel and you would remove permissions from from the coordinator section, or you can remove permissions from the actual module itself under the configure tool. So any of the ways that we showed how to add permissions, you would just do that entire process in reverse. You would just click the little remove trash can icon next to that administrator or coordinator that you do not that you no longer want to have access to your website. Someone asked, do you have to remove bad emails or expired members individually, or is there a way to remove several at once? For bad emails, I believe that is individual. For expired members, if you wanted to bulk remove expired members, there is a way to do that. We usually encourage people to be very cautious when they're doing bulk changes like that, because a lot of times you may accidentally catch people that may not need to be removed just yet. So again, for bad emails, that is a case by case basis, because there's several different reasons that someone might have a bad email address. It could just be entered incorrectly. It could be bouncing. Um, any number of reasons we might get a bad email. So that does have to be case by case. But for expired members over in the People Manager, there is an option to uh, bulk, what we call drop them. So we would set them to the drop status, which is kind of our pseudo deleted option. But if you choose that option that Sam is showing right now, the drop expired, it'll give you a pop-up that will let you select a date range of members so everyone who has expired from a date or before would be set to the drop status. But a lot of times you have to keep in mind that you might have someone who, expired yesterday and is planning to renew this weekend. And if you drop everyone that expired starting yesterday, suddenly you have a lot of members who no longer have access to accounts that they were planning to renew. So whenever I'm like bulk dropping expired members, I always kind of say you want to go back at least 12 months. I usually say 24 months, like 2 years to be safe. Because if someone hasn't been active in your organization for more than 2 years, then they probably are safe to drop and they could just set up a new account if they need to. But, if someone's only been active for a handful of months, there's all the chance in the world they could come back. Does a member receive notification when access is removed? No. There is not an email that lets them know that they've been removed as an admin or a coordinator. When they log in, if you take someone off and they no longer have access to either a specific module or any modules, if their entire access is removed, they would just see that they don't have the option to access that module from the backend anymore. But no, there's not a notice that goes out to them. That would be whenever we're talking about giving or removing access, we usually are leaning on the concept that your administrative team is probably communicating with each other directly. So, shooting a text or sending an email, hey, Deborah, I gave you access to, the events module. Usually the only time we're sending notices to admins or sending notices to members is based on some sort of communication between those two. So member to member notifications, not really a thing. Admin to admin notifications. What we're really doing is saying, if an admin takes an action on a member that never has been an admin, usually they'll get a notice about that. And then similarly, if a member takes an action that generates a transaction or something like that, an admin will get a notification about that. But if there's an admin taking action on another admin, there's not a notification generated. And can you explain the difference between bad emails versus a bounced email? So bad is kind of a term we use to encapsulate a number of different so that's kind of square rectangle situation. So a bouncing email is a bad email, but we have a couple different classifications. You'll see Sam is highlighting right there. We've got things like bad format, which means they've left off, they forgot to put in the at sign, or they had a typo in there and it's a comma instead of a dot. So for some reason, the formatting of the actual email address is incorrect. Invalid email address, that would be our option where we've tried to send to that email address, but it just doesn't exist. So oftentimes that can also be a typo, but it's a typo of like instead of saying gmail.com, it says gnail.com. It's just a mild typo. We try to send it and it doesn't exist. Then there's blocked, which means the member has either from their email inbox unsubscribed from emails from your organization, or they've gone to their membership profile and chosen to decline to receive emails from your organization. That can be undone. So the member can choose to go into their own profile and go to their privacy settings and change that themselves to start receiving emails. But that is something that, we have to, because of a lot of communications laws, we have to give people the option to not receive emails. So that would have to be an option allowed to them. And then there's also temporary failure. That is if any of the above are selected and we try to send an email to them, they would we try to send again. So if someone is marked as temporary failure, that means we tried once or twice and we will continue to try again. Once we fail to send someone an email 3 times, we will reclassify them as a bad email and they will no longer be sent emails at all until action is taken by an admin. So we will try to send them emails even if the first attempt doesn't work, we'll still try again. But once we have sent 3 emails and they have gone nowhere, we will stop trying to send to them because it's there's a lot of effort that goes into sending thousands of emails to people that have bad email addresses. They said, can you clarify why you would put a personal email address for communications from a president, but you insert, that's personal preference. So someone's asking, why would you use a personal email for one contact and a, more general like finance email? For others, that's entirely up to your organization. You could have all of your contacts be, you know, president at myclub.com, treasurer at myclub.com, so on and so forth. But if you're, let's say your president prefers to be more transparent and doesn't want to have a, more blanket, they want to say, hey, reach out to me at, Samantha at myclub.com. That's just a preference thing. You have complete control over that. And if you don't want to put personal email addresses, then you don't have to. And if you want to, you can. So that's just something that you would select for your organization. That's not a recommendation on our part. I think that is most of the questions that we have. If there is anything else, we'll have the recording of this up in a couple days, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time. Sam, I'll let you take the reins back.
Well, thank you so much. And if anyone has any burning questions, we saw a couple of questions about membership directors and different things like that. Don't forget that our upcoming webinar in a few weeks is our tips for membership directors. So we're going to be tackling that. Make sure that your membership directors know about that and go to our calendar to sign up so they can get it on their calendar. We want to thank you all for joining. We really appreciate you taking the time to just get back to the basics, do a little, just a quick cleanup of your site. We hope to see you in our future webinars, and don't forget to check out the recording. Thanks and have a great day, everybody. Bye bye.